Soundstripe.
Hi everyone, I'm Aaron and I'm here with my friend Karen, who is a trauma-informed psychotherapist. And we're here to talk about Karen's recent workshop regarding transforming stress and grief into resilience, um, and a little bit more. So, like, can you basically say, share about what you recently did?
Well, there's something I've been doing for over 30 years, which is psychotherapy, but really understanding that trauma and grief are live in the body. And so this is something I learned a long time ago, but in the pandemic, it became clear to the rest of the population as everyone's systems were overloaded.
Yeah.
And we didn't have places to exercise or to meet with friends or to do things that we normally do as an outlet for this overwhelm that was going on. And so much was happening in that period of time. I mean, it was people were dying. We couldn't get out anywhere. The future was unknown. There was violence erupting, added division. There was just so much going on along with people's everyday lives and the containers of our own world that are normal stress things, like you're caring for an older parent, you have kids that are just doing normal things, weddings, funerals. These are normal things that we deal with, and then add these layers that people were breaking down. And it really came time for this kind of universal understanding that people who really understand the nervous system is like needed to step forward
Mhm.
and really look at it from that perspective. And so that's kind of, it was in the pandemic that it became sort of, I began to do more trainings and workshops on grief and the mechanism of stress and how it works in the nervous system and things that we can do. And I also, my clients were a little at an advantage because they were already doing this stuff, which is really knowing that the body holds the history of everything that ever happens to us. It's just the way it is. And so if something happens when you're 8 years old and you don't express it, and what we understand is that energy doesn't disappear. So where does energy go if you don't express it? Well, it goes inward, right? And we hold it in places in our body. And we also know that our culture is not great. There's a couple taboos, and one is to really face death, and the other is to express emotion.
Mhm.
Really, that's not something we do. Like when someone dies, you get a certain amount of period of time to grieve, and then it's like kind of suck it up and move on.
Yeah.
And we're such adaptive creatures that we do that pretty well. What we do is achieve. We go do out into the world, we, do all kinds of things like that. But in the pandemic, we couldn't achieve.
Yeah.
So think about that. So people were just imploding all over the place. So what ended up happening is I began to just do more workshops, do more training, do more studying myself on like there was a lot of new research coming out about how the brain works in grief and all this stuff. So I got really sort of obsessed with it. I learned a lot in the pandemic. And I started to integrate and realize it sort of reinforced what I was already doing, but I was really, the science sort of was catching up with it. And the other thing that was happening that was interesting is that science and spirituality started to merge. And
Yeah.
things about mindfulness and presence and all these things that were like woo woo spiritual were science. And so I was sort of set up to really meet the times, and other sort of body centered therapists were able to sort of meet the moment. And so that's kind of what I've been doing and been kind of obsessed with and excited about, going to schools and working with schools on, a lot of grief and trauma and what that looks like and how we can kind of address it. And lately going into with what's happening now
Mhm.
is okay, we had the pandemic, we've had all this upheaval, we've had all kinds of political stuff with division and all that stuff happening within our world now, and people are actually dealing with losing their jobs in mass. And so, what I'm interested in now and what I've been doing is going to organizations where people are losing their jobs and doing grief workshops. And that's what I did recently with a non for profit where people were in mass were, as soon as contracts are coming up, anyone working with refugees, that's it, you're done. Those programs are closing. And so people are unemployed and they don't realize that not only can that be traumatic, but it's also a loss.
Mhm.
And so it really fits. It's a form of grief because that's what grief is. It is when we are sort of grief's job really is to it breaks us what we thought our world was. It breaks us into a million pieces, and then we come back together differently if we process it. And that's what transformation is about. And that's what I help people understand is that because the brain doesn't really it has its own GPS about it's organized around all the habits and past understanding of what the world is like with this job that you've had for 10 years or a person that you married and has been in your life that is no longer there. It knows what to do. Like I know my son is in Minnesota, right? And my brain understands that he's not here, but he's in Minnesota. But if he's not here on this earth, the brain has to create a whole new GPS system. And that's how the brain works, right? So there's who we are before the loss and then who we are after the loss, which is an entirely different person. And that's what we have to understand is that when people get stuck in grief, is they get stuck in trying to get back to something that doesn't exist anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So how does that work? Well, we have to process the loss by grieving, right? And grief needs a witness. It needs somebody there as a non-judgmental, compassionate person to help us express our emotions around it, to deal with the grief. And plus, we have to deal with everyday things like looking for a new job, creating a resume, stressful things, right? We need help with that, right? And we need to create new memories without that person or that job. And that's the thing that takes time because
Yeah.
it involves engaging in everyday life and having new experiences and meeting people and right. And that's what helps the brain to create a new GPS. And that's why it takes time to grieve because it has to have we have to have new experiences so the brain can create that map and that's why it takes time because we really need new experiences. So it's these three mechanisms, that's how the brain works to really work through grief. And when you do that, you're not trying to be who you were, nor do you want to be who you were before it because there's something that's changed in you.
Yeah.
And you learn that that person or that job, it's beside you now. It's not in your past anymore. It's not in your future. It's that person is beside you and they can live in this spiritual realm or this emotional space beside you, but they're no longer in your future. But you're able to move forward and create a new world and a new identity, right, when you're able to process this. So this is like what I help people understand, and there's a lot of tools to do that to help work with the brain. I just sort of was referencing some of those, like understanding that model, allowing people to actually do their grief work, which is to express. I always say infants are really great grief teachers because they're allowed to cry without anyone judging them. They're allowed to wail. And healthier, mostly indigenous cultures, they'll go up to a mountain and they'll wail and they'll wail and they'll wail until they can't cry anymore. And then they'll go back up if they need to, right? Do we do that in this culture?
No.
And that's what I like to help people do, like make it normal, number one, to talk about loss. I always say like 100% death rate. It's going to happen. None of us get out of here alive,
Right.
right?
Let's get out of here.
It should be a normal part of our conversation, and it isn't. And that's what probably, if I get nothing else out of these workshops, it's opening up a conversation
Yeah.
about loss and grief.
Yeah.
And what that does, once you open up that box, then you're able to explore other grief that's happened in your life that maybe you've never processed. And that's a whole nother, layer of transformation and growth.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm up to.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And I think it's relevant to the times we're in right now. And I
Yeah.
think we wouldn't be watching so much violence and division if people were able to process their trauma and grief. And the reason we work with trauma is because trauma unprocessed looks like and we are being ruled by the external world. And so then you're
Mm.
easily influenced by
Yeah.
the news
Yeah.
and the
Or
scary
social media.
social media. I can't tell you how many people are dealing with insecurities around not getting enough likes or not being relevant, feeling relevant,
Yeah.
and really more exploring your internal world and what that feels like to kind of be on the inside looking out instead of the outside looking in. It's a whole different experience being embodied.
Mhm.
It's really it's a game changer
Yeah.
of how you deal with times like this where it's less critical what's going on out there,
Yeah.
and it's more how am I being creative, how am I, the creative center is our heart. And so if you're working from that space in your heart, then answers come. You're able to find a creative solution to your current situation. Be able to create new relationships, and all kinds of things can come from that if that's where you're coming from. But if you're coming from some sort of validation, you're just going to be. So I really do like everyone's got their own formula for life, I think. And my formula is really sort of this working with the truth of what your body's trying to tell you and really expressing it, and having a bigger picture or spiritual perspective.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my formula for working with people. And for myself, I have to constantly be working on myself, because otherwise you go easily back into your head, into this place, instead of it from the heart. So I need to always be vigilant with my own personal work.
Yeah. Can you share a little bit more about your personal work? 'Cause I know you work with a couple of things, and I know that, like you and I are both study Kabbalah, because you had mentioned earlier about spirituality and science meeting. So can you just share a little bit about that?
Well, I guess, maybe I could share like maybe the first conversation I have with my clients and how I kind of put it together. Um, and this is kind of I learned in my spiritual practice, which is Kabbalah and other things, but it's a universal spirituality, is the idea of a lamp, where if you look at the lamp, right, and you have the bulb underneath the lamp, right, and then you put a shade on the bulb, let's say it's like a 60-watt bulb, right, and you put a shade on the bulb, and then you put veils over, keep putting them over, like what happens to the light? Ron, what happens to it?
It's gets dimmer
Yeah,
or
it keeps getting dimmer or black, right?
black, right?
Right. And that's kind of how what we think we see, which
Yeah.
is, but is the light wattage changed?
No.
So it's shining at the same level, right? So if this bulb is our soul, it is who we really are, and we identify with the veils, we think we are all the things that have happened to us.
Mhm.
But when we're working, we're removing all of these illusions, these veils, these held emotions that are points of trauma in your life where things have happened and you didn't express them.
Mhm.
And by going in there, I usually navigate through the body to where people are. I usually put people in sort of a very settled place in their body, and where they can kind of feel what's going on there, because we spend our days distracting ourselves from our actual bodies.
Yeah.
So if you quiet for a minute, you'll notice. If we had time, we could do that, but we're not going to do that today. But really, if you just take the practice of quieting your own body for a second, feeling your feet, and just noticing the stirrings in your body's talking to you and it's telling you what wants to move that maybe isn't. It might be your throat, maybe your heart, maybe your gut. Each of them is pointing to something. Like the throat is something that wants to be expressed. It's not rocket science here. The heart is loss, longing, love, grief. The belly is fear, right? So if we kind of locate that and give it expression, then what happens is a veil gets removed. And as each veil gets removed, our light emerges. And it's not something we have to try at. It takes no effort. It just emerges. We're allowing it to come. And then you just kind of feel a sense of expansiveness, Answers happen, epiphanies, like that thing that you couldn't solve is all of a sudden solved on its own. That's what happens when you're in that space of really just experiencing your own soul.
Yeah.
And it's by removing these things that we've been identifying with all this time that allows us to emerge. And that's what real transformation is allowing ourselves to emerge to our potential and being who we really are and
Yeah.
not the veils that we identify with. I hope
Mhm.
that makes sense, but to me it
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. So,
It
and my
does.
clients seem to like that as a beginning point, like this is the work we're going to be doing together.
Yeah.
So that's yeah, that's kind of the bottom line of how I merge the sort of universal spiritual concepts about how energy works. It's quantum physics, basically,
Hmm.
and self acceptance work, which is my body centered modality, self acceptance training, SAT. I experience who I am in any given moment without judging myself, without self evaluation or self criticism. Then, when you allow yourself to experience it, like, I'm really sad, then something changes. But when we're judging ourselves, it's like a mother telling a child, shh, shh, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. That's what we tell ourselves. Then we get stuck in it. So when we allow that, then things move.
Hmm.
So that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
And I really have found when I go to agencies or go to places, the people are hungry for this information. They didn't know that they didn't have to achieve their way out of everything. Stuff it down, forge ahead, suck it up. That they didn't realize, they thought people think that that's how you're supposed to do it. Maybe because it's their culture, maybe it's because it's other pressures they put on themselves. Everyone's got a different tolerance level for stress.
Yeah.
Some people seem to be have it more flexible. Other
Hmm.
people are more tight. Depends on a lot of things, but there's always a starting point, and it's the starting point is wherever you're at,
Yeah.
and then it just sort of naturally unfolds. So that's kind of how I bring it all together, and that's my formula. I'm sure other people have theirs, but
Yeah.
it works for me, and that's kind of what I like to share with people
Hmm.
in various ways, either as a therapist or in trainings.
Yeah. Yeah. It
Offers.
would add a lot of value to people and organizations, what you're creating and what you're sharing. So
Yeah, well,
that's
I'm hoping to. I think it's really people want it right now. People are
yeah.
ready. They're ready for it.
Hmm. Yes. Yeah.
And it's the positive, they're ready to address things that they couldn't address before for
Yep.
whatever reason. I think all of these things, if you really kind of look back at your life, there's sort of breadcrumbs that show you, bring you to where you are now. I know that I found Kabbalah. I had to do a certain amount of work on myself, and then it kind of appeared, and then it was like another layer that I needed to expand what I was already doing.
Yeah.
I had to do a certain amount of work on myself to kind of be ready for it. So things come to you when you're ready, and I think more and more people are ready, especially since if you kind of look online at all the various therapy modalities, they're incorporating spirituality. I think it's because we need it.
Yeah.
We need it to really navigate the world as it is now.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I always like to. I don't know if you saw the show Station 11.
No.
Okay, it's a sci-fi. It's a future. It's like a sci-fi, apocalyptic sci-fi, and
Mm.
they refer to like the pre-pandemics,
Yeah.
the post-pan, right? And there's the pre-pans who are us who knows what the world was like before the pandemic, and then there are people born after the pandemic who will never know
Yeah.
what it's like. But us pre-pans are keep trying to get back to before the
Mm.
pandemic, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But the world is not the same.
Hmm.
and we have to like accept that.
Yeah.
It's one of the stages of grief, acceptance, in order to create a new world instead of trying to go back to, people who have lost like fortunes. I can't tell you how many stories I hear about people who don't live a quality life because they're constantly trying to and yearning to get back to when they had a lot of money. They just can't accept it, and that's how you get stuck.
Yeah.
But the idea is you're not the same and nothing's the same as it was before, and that's okay
Yeah.
because you can actually be more if you're not trying to get back to something that you're not anymore.
Yeah. I was just having a conversation with a friend this weekend, and I joked around about it because he was, telling me, do you ever like, think about like the term, oh man, those were the good old days. Um, you ever think about that? Like, do you think the good old days are behind us? And I was joking. I told him like, man, if you think the good old days are behind you, your life is over.
You're in trouble if that's what you're going back to. Plus, the good old days weren't as good as people think, right? They just
Exactly
have this
right. Yeah.
romantic idea. But it's really like this idea of like stepping into the unknown.
Hmm.
And who do you want to be? Do you want to be like a beacon of light standing, or do you want to like be in the corner
Yeah.
afraid? I always use the example of the Titanic. And you remember the guy who, I remember being so struck by this. Like, there was a guy who jumps into the women and children's lifeboat before it goes down. He like
Mm.
freaks out and he jumps. And I remember that struck me. I'm like, I never want to be that guy. I never want to be that guy. It's like an impetus for the work I've done on myself so that I can be a courageous person in uncertain times.
Yeah.
But you have to do your work. That's the whole thing. You've got to
Yeah.
do your trauma work, your grief work, and emerge as that person because we all are capable of that. But if we're clouded with those veils, we're going to be that guy
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
on the women and children's boat.
Well, awesome. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing all this.
Yeah.
Um, and that, definitely you can go to your website and get more information at www.healingfromtheinsideout.com. So you can get more info on what Karen is up to and the really great work that she's doing. So
Thanks, Ron.
thank you.
Okay.
Soundstripe.